Thanks, Alex. Appreciate the opportunity to speak to the dealers. As you mentioned, I work exclusively with dealers, head up our dealership team, and me and my group work exclusively with dealers and have since 1987. As I say to a lot of people that I meet, I'm probably the strangest CPA you're going to meet because I'm probably the only CPA you're going to meet who's run a service department, actually GM'd a store, and I owned a dealership. Now, that was a car dealership, a Nissan car dealership, but we've got staff with boots on the ground experience and do a lot of succession planning work for our dealers. So there's my picture. Let's move on to the topic for today, which is dealership succession planning. And a sound dealership succession plan addresses a long list of issues, including retirement income, transferring wealth to the dealer's heirs, transferring ownership, dealing with the income and estate tax consequences associated with an ownership transfer, and addressing other issues key to the ongoing success of the business, not the least of which, and often forgotten, is transitioning management. So to help you address all of these important considerations, we've put together today's webinar on dealership succession planning steps, and you see the 10 steps in front of you, and we're going to touch on these today. As we get started, I want to make a couple of points. First of all is, if as a dealer you've met with your estate planning attorney or estate planning CPA or estate planning insurance agent, they probably have done just that, the estate planning. And if you see, step number 7 is one of the steps, and it deals with estate planning, but it's a small step. And if all you've done is estate planning, you really haven't planned for the successful succession of the dealership. So we're going to we could touch on estate taxes, but very little. We're really talking about truly the successful future of the dealership. And you really can't address all business succession issues at once. What happens with one is going to affect how you handle another. Ideally, a dealer begins planning with a third-party professional, someone who has industry as well as succession planning expertise. This planning should begin at least 10 years prior to an expected retirement date and needs to include a contingency plan should death, illness, a family situation, or other change of heart require an earlier than expected transition date. With regards to this, we worked with a dealer down in Southern Ohio who met with me. He was about 52 when we met, and he said, "Hey, I don't think I've got any family that's going to come into the business. My daughter is in high school still, but I really don't think this is going to happen. I want to plan for what's going to happen in 10 or 15 years." We sat down, we planned, we made a plan. Lo and behold, a year or so later, he goes to the doctor and he's fine, but he had an unexpected health issue. And that changed his mindset. So the week of the Super Bowl this year, we ended up selling his dealership because he wanted out. He decided he wanted to do other things, spend time with the family, and so forth at the age of 54, I believe, at that point. So having that contingency plan was important to us because we could move it up and start working immediately on his desired goals at that point. The contingency plan, I'm kind of skipping ahead a little bit, but the contingency plan is vital for dealing with the unexpected death. And we've had two situations. One I got a call last week from a dealer, and one we actually handled this past summer where the dealer principal died completely unexpectedly at an early age. Getting back to the overall succession planning, for many dealers, the dealership is really like their child. They're committed to their business, to its grooming, its success. Their ties to the business go beyond just financial to emotional, just like their children. Therefore, when we're doing succession planning, we have to consider these emotional ties as well as the financial aspects of retirement, of transfer that's going to happen. It's either going to go to the family or to someone outside, and transitioning that and transitioning successfully. The first step in effective succession planning is to identify and prioritize your goals. Succession plans have value for dealers only if they meet their goals. Identifying goals includes determining that they're realistic, and prioritization comes into play in resolving conflicts between mutually exclusive goals. For example, if you're selling to a third party, you want a top price for your business, but you also want to maximize the tax burden from the sale. And sometimes those are in conflict. And you may not be able to get both. We recently handled a situation involving mutually exclusive goals. A selling dealer wanted to reward his employees for their years of service with extended separation pay, but it reduced the proceeds from the sale of the dealership. Ultimately, we reached a middle ground whereby the employees were treated very well, and the dealer was still able to receive funds sufficient to retire comfortably. What succession planning needs to address are the bullets on this slide. We need to provide for a financial security to the owner after retirement. Those payments may be coming from continued payments from the dealership. It may be payments relative to the real estate only, where we're leasing it to the family members that have taken over, or the employee group who's taken over, or the third parties that have taken over. But regardless, there's got to be financial security for the dealer going forward. Met with a dealer. We actually closed 4 transactions the week of the Super Bowl. I don't ever want to do that again. But in this situation, the dealer came to us the summer prior to this past winter, so a year ago, and we were talking, and we went through our process, and we determined that he determined that his son, who was working in the business, really wasn't capable of operating the business. And so we had a hard talk with the dealer, first of all, and said, your future financial well-being, and he was 62 or so, probably, if I remember correctly. We're living longer. You're going to have to provide for yourself and your wife for another 30 years after you retire, potentially. Your father, in this case, his father had lived to a ripe old age, and there was nothing indicating that he wasn't going to, and his wife wasn't going to as well. So we're living longer. So this financial security is very, very important. And if we transfer the business, while we want to transfer the business maybe to the family members, it may, if the family members run the business in the ground, you're no longer going to have financial security. And as I joked with him, you may end up being a Walmart greeter at that point, which is not a good solution. So anyway, we've got to provide for the financial security to the owner. We also have to think about the owner's family in the case of death or disability that can happen prematurely, ensuring the dealership's continued success in the owner's absence. Let's say you're going to take a leave of absence for some reason, health issue. You've got to be gone for a while. Let's make sure that the dealership can operate without you being there. I don't know how many times I see dealers who are responsible for half, 2/3, 3/4 of the sales operations sometimes. Well, how's that dealership going to continue to operate if you're gone at that point? We also have to deal equitably. That doesn't mean, or fairly. It says equitably, doesn't imply equal. It's really fairly with children working in the business and those who are not. Then we need to limit the ownership interest in the dealership to persons who are acceptable to all the owners. But then we also have to develop a solution that's acceptable to the manufacturers as well. The most common owner's goals in planning for succession involve keeping the dealership in the family. Quite frequently, the dealer wants to transfer that business that they grew to the next generation. And sometimes, very frequently, that's workable, but sometimes it's not. Another goal is to maintain a successful operation and profitability into the future. As I said earlier, your financial well-being is likely going to be tied to the future financial performance of the store. We've got to provide liquidity to the owner or to his estate, his or her estate. We've got to provide financial security to the families, the dealer's family members as well. We want to also, I wouldn't be a good CPA if I didn't mention minimizing current tax liabilities and the potential estate tax liability. And then most importantly, and oftentimes forgotten by the estate planning attorneys or the estate CPAs, are maintaining family harmony. We need to ultimately be able to get together at the holidays and birthdays. Family transitions can be fraught with conflicting goals. A dealer looking to maximize ongoing income to his children learned that getting the income he wanted would burden the dealership profits to the point of threatening the future of the business. Again, we had to make some difficult decisions with regards to balancing these conflicting goals. A more common issue arising in family transition is either the lack of interest or leadership skills on the part of that incoming family member. Dealers, you should not assume that your children's goals are the same as yours. They often have other plans that do not involve the dealership at all. So succession planning must include determining which family members are in, which are out, and consider the transition of management, which possibly is going to include non-family members. And then you have to consider the transition of ownership. And that may or may not include non-family members as well. So management transition and ownership transition are not the same thing and don't have to be the same thing. We can transfer ownership of the dealership to the family members, but still have management control with our key members of management and stress all of that. In light of all of these goals, we can identify 5 different dealer succession profiles. Number 1 is owners with children to whom they want to transfer the business. Second is dealers who want to sell the dealership to a third party outside the family member. Third, owners who want to sell the dealership to invest the proceeds in another business or investment opportunity. Where there are multiple owners, an owner who wants to sell to the partner or the partners is an issue. These types of sales can present troublesome situations. For example, where one partner is not capable of managing the dealership is being bought out by another. We've seen long, protracted struggles over such issues as control and value in these situations. And then the 5th situation is owners who want to run the business until their death. For these owners, the contingency plan is particularly important. And specifically, I'm talking about how to transition ownership and management in case a serious illness